Hey everybody, welcome back to the second episode of 8-Bit Shower Thoughts. My name is Kevin alongside my friend Ryan. Today we're going to be talking about kind of nostalgia in video games, diving back into like what made games fun for us growing up, and kind of maybe exploring why it feels today that games struggle so much to kind of recapture that in today's video game market. There is no real structure today. It's just kind of a conversation, so we're just gonna kind of dive on in and see how or where we go from here. I don't know if you have anything you want to tack on.
I'm coming up with this term immediately right now. Sorry, let me make that more redundant. Immediately right now on the spot. So nostalgia in video games, or when you think of an old game you would play versus a newer game you might play now, I feel like the emotional economy, that's a coin term now, that you have
NFT,
yeah, exactly, that you have is higher. It has higher value as a kid, and kind of wondering,
like you get more emotionally invested.
You get more emotionally invested, or you feel when you think back on it, you think, wow, I was more attached to these games than I would
better be. Objectively worse because
right, the technology got better. To be fair, I think there are some practices that are happening nowadays that weren't around, like microtransactions. They never existed. So I don't know if that was a factor, or if it's just kind of like, hey, you're a kid and these things to experience as a kid are gonna be innately more exciting. So I don't know if I just grew up sort of, podcast about video games, so how much did I grow up?
Right.
The question on top of that.
Mid-20s talking about video games. Did we actually grow up? Stay tuned for
episode 3.
So I pulled up the dictionary definition of nostalgia.
Okay, perfect.
Just out of sheer curiosity.
Is that going to be
first
the start of Webster's Dictionary defines nostalgia as?
Yes, as the state of being homesick. That's useless. Or the second definition is a wistful or excessively sentimental yearning for return to or of some past period or irrecoverable condition. Also something that evokes nostalgia.
And then I want like the third definition.
No, the third definition is something that evokes nostalgia.
I want it to be something like a buzzsaw. Like some random item that you just wouldn't know about.
Yeah, I mean, looking at games now, they are.
Oh, hold on. Can we put like a time frame on games now?
Games now, I mean,
would you say like 2015, 2015 forward?
Yeah, 5 years. But I was gonna kind of jump back to your first memory growing up. They define it like psychologically as something that's either like really tragic, like something that like, you break your arm when you're 2.
Sure.
You'll always remember that. Or something that made you like really happy. Like, you remember getting, I don't know, your first bicycle. Something like that. So we remember our first memories with video games are gonna be, I think, the highlight of video game. I remember there was an old game called Buck Bumble. I don't know if you ever played it.
I don't think anybody but you has played this.
I comment down below if you've ever played Buck Bumble. You play as a bee in like a third-person shooter-esque game. It was a lot of fun. But like, I don't remember, I couldn't tell you what the controls, like the aerial controls were on an N64 and how they would like hold up today, because they're probably terrible.
Awful.
If it was an N64.
Like if you were playing Squadrons versus Bug Bumble.
Yeah, Buck Bumble. Yeah, like Squadrons has like great controls, even for mouse and keyboard. But I do remember is how much fun it was to fly around and shoot stuff as a bee, even though I hated bees growing up. I don't know why. It was the ugliest color palette too. Everything was like yellow and green. It wasn't great. I just remember I was like, cool, I'm a bee.
I'm a bee.
Just like
got him.
Shit. But I don't remember like how awful the controls might have been. I pulled up the Wikipedia page for Buck Bumble.
Oh,
Buck Bumble is an action video game for the N64 developed by British video game company Argonaut Software and released by Ubisoft. Heyo.
Wait, hold on. Ubisoft, is it also an open world game?
No, I think it's a lean shooter. So it's gonna have some R6 mechanics.
Oh, that's
all right.
That makes sense.
Here we go. The plot. First line. The year is 2010.
Keep going. Please keep going.
And as the result of a previous spill at a chemical factory in London, England, the insects in the surrounding area have mutated.
What? It's just like, I feel like old video games with some fucking corporate executive who like tripped acid, gave like the B plot to a shitty movie, and was like, make it.
Like, I also like, I just want to hit, like, kind of touch on the fact that the year is 2010. They did not have a bright outlook on the future here. Like, at least Back to the Future gave us like 30 years before we like went to shit with it. Buck Bumble was like, nope, 12 years from now we're gonna have mutated bees, babe. Although, the killer wasps up in Washington this year, maybe that was the
Buck Bumble prophecy.
Yeah, the Buck Bumble prophecy.
And I think from now on, we should just have an episode where we read synopses of old video games.
I'm here for that. Stay tuned for that.
Stay
Don't steal our
tuned.
idea.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if anybody steals that idea, we're suing, I think.
Yeah, I'll call up my lawyers.
Yeah, I've got a lawyer on retainer.
Anyway, back to the original.
I think a good example is Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think back to it with like really cool graphics, obviously really cool, great tight controls.
Yeah.
And then actually I have yet to purchase the remakes on my PlayStation, but I intend to, and I've seen gameplay, and I mean, it looks stunning. And you'll see like the side by side, and you're like, I thought this was the same game.
Yes, like you look at old Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, and they don't look great.
No.
But what you do remember is how fire the soundtrack was.
Oh, so good.
So good.
And so much fun. It's just,
and like how much fun it was to play as like Rodney Mullen.
Yeah, and just like your favorite skaters, Bucky Vlasic.
So it came out like, and it looks clean now.
Sure.
But for some reason, like, it wasn't as fun as the original was, and I don't know why.
Oh, okay. Well, wait. Actually, real quick, you played Resident Evil 2, right? The remake.
Yeah.
Did you ever play the original?
Yeah.
How did those two compare?
Well, RE2 remake wasn't a strict remake.
Okay.
It was almost a reimagining of sorts, because the original Resi 2 and Resi 1 had the tank controls, awkward tight corridors, and Resi 2 went over the shoulder with it. They took like that Resi 4, that third person aspect. I loved it because it took what I loved about Resident Evil 2 and almost expanded on it. Like it was like, you know, as a kid, you really feel like, oh, these tight corridors. You really feel like the suspense and the tension from your surrounding areas. And Resident 2 was able to recapture that, but it did it differently. Like it did it from that over the shoulder. So they're not like one-to-one comparisons.
Right.
There are like key differences. And I think maybe that's part of it, is it was able to expand properly. Like when we talk about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the new one,
yes,
you know, maybe the soundtrack wasn't as good, or maybe it's more about capturing specific parts while innovating or improving upon other aspects of the game, because obviously Resident Evil has better graphics now than it did like
then to kind
years
of
ago.
Tangent to that, when you think of your original experience with Resi 2 and compare it against your experience with the remake, is there a like one-for-one emotional connection, right? Like you played and you go, this is what I felt.
Yeah, and there was, and part of that was because there were moments in Resi 2, and like, you know, Marvin dies, like spoilers, sorry, like he dies. Anyway, like seeing what Marvin goes through, but like basically in 4K, it was like just as impactful now as it was when I was a kid. Mr. X is just as annoying now as he was back then. Lickers are just as scary now as they were back then, because like while they improved the camera controls and like the controls in general, you know, they went to, like, they didn't just like go, okay, here's cool graphic. It was like, all right, we're gonna do over the shoulder, so you have better controls. But now the zombies also move better, right? So like, yes, you have over the controls, but now it's harder to hit your shots because the zombies will like sway their heads, or Lickers are like more aggressive, or, you know, they changed like the AI. Like they went from, okay, we're gonna like improve A, but improving A also like changes certain aspects of the game, so we also need to improve B,
right? And
like they kind of went down the line with it. Whereas I feel like, you know, like Ocarina of Time, when they remade it for the DS, was fun and it was great. It was improved everything, but it was like the same.
It was the exact same.
It was like just the same game. And I remember, like, I beat Ocarina. beat all the Zeldas. And I remember beating Ocarina of Time, and I was like, this was fun, this was great, but it didn't do anything so special. I think Resi 2 Remake is gonna hold like that. It's gonna be on a pedestal where it's like it took an old game and just made it infinitely better, right, and brought it to like a new generation. Whereas like the Ocarina of Time Remake just felt like we're just gonna upgrade the graphics and that's it. When I felt like there could have been more done with like the music or the Ocarina itself, and you know, modernized it a little bit more.
Right. And that's what I don't like about a lot of remakes that come out, is that they only change the visuals, which is great because there is a certain dopamine rush that you get when you see an older video game that you have nostalgia for in like 4K or what have you, and all of a sudden it looks fantastic and you're like, oh yes, that's so awesome. But yeah, without deeper gameplay that's been expanded on, or you know, like you were saying, the controls are tighter, which means the zombies have to be more aggressive. Without those implementations on top of that, the gameplay is gonna fall flat because it's outdated gameplay.
Yeah, and like playing on the DS, you know, I don't think this is a stretch to say the DS controls way easier than an N64. N64's controller was terrible. Love it to death. It was terrible. Yeah. So Ocarina of Time felt easy again. Like it just felt too simple. I was like, okay, the platforming isn't as difficult now as it was before, because the DS, because it's smoother, everything ran smoother. The platforming wasn't as difficult, or it didn't feel so arduous. I remember like in the Deku Tree, like as a kid growing up, like hopping from platform to platform, or even like figuring out how to like jump off and spin down and break the web. Like those were kind of like aha moments, but it was just so much easier to maneuver. And in like the Forest Temples, the same thing, like jumping from the platforms across, it's like it wasn't hard because like the game controlled so well.
Yes. And
I don't know if like you necessarily need to make it harder, but that's where we're talking about like smoother controls. You need there should be some change
in past games.
Yeah. So then like, okay, now it's just a little bit easier. Like, you know, I'm playing the Mass Effect remake right now, and I had to up the difficulty because, you know, I'm no longer, I'm on mouse and keyboard. I'm not on 30 FPS. I'm at a higher FPS, so I can see more. Like the controls are a little clunky, just like the way the keybinds are. But you have to up the difficulty because I can just one-shot things from like across the map, because I'm not like trying to like maneuver an Xbox 360 ADS third person at 30 FPS, and I'm not hindered by all that.
Right.
So those like tougher shots aren't as tough to make anymore. Now, granted, the game's not all about the combat, but it does play an integral part, and so it doesn't feel as fun as it, because like I thought, like, you know, part of those is like the challenge you faced with awkward controls, or like the difficulties with the technology, like the limited technology back in the 90s, early 2000s.
But even with those limited technologies, right, like we were playing on GameCube, we're playing on OG Xbox 360 eventually, there's still something about those games that we played that felt more rewarding for whatever or we look back on it and go, wow, that's the experience I want to have again, that we don't necessarily have. Maybe a good example of this is like Castle Crashers. If you're not familiar, Castle Crashers is up to 4 players, and it's like the traditional couch co-op game, right?
Yeah, like side scrolling.
You and your 4 friends, you and your 3 friends, I guess, each grab a controller and you play as these cute characters and just kind of run your way through these levels. It was not complicated, and it was so much fun to not only play once but over and over again.
Yeah.
So
and
does it feel like we have something like that?
I think part of it too is so like you obviously see game developers like trying to push the limits of like the technology they have. You know, you look at like GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, stuff like that. But I think part of it too is when you are limited in your technology, you know, like an N64 game's like less than a gig. They're looking at Call of Duty games that are like 100 gigs. Part of it though is because they were aware, okay, these graphics aren't great, or, you know, they were limited in what they could do. I feel like the focus went other places. Nowadays, you know, you look at games, it's like, well, you have to look good, you gotta control well, best cosmetics, you gotta have the best progression system. Like, there's more expectation, I think, now, whereas back then it was like nobody really cared necessarily like how the game felt. Like, the controls weren't great, but they were great in like other aspects, whether it was like an encapsulating story, like interesting characters, somewhat innovative combat styles.
And I think what is bigger, especially in like the N64 GameCube days, people need to understand, especially maybe the younger crowd, is that video games were like just taking off, maybe, right? Like Pokemon became really big, and I think Pokemon did a really good job, maybe increasing the legitimacy of video games as something to do because of how ubiquitous it was. And a lot of the early N64, GameCube, PS2 games, there were no corporate constraints, right? There wasn't a development team that was like, oh, it's November 13th. Have we pushed out the next Assassin's Creed yet? That wasn't a thing. So, games, I don't know how long it took to develop an N64 game, but they had the time to cook that they needed.
But like, so there were still those people who are trying to like cash grab onto it. But I think part of, we look at games now and you think about those cash grabbing moments, and those like the next Call of Duty, the next Madden or next FIFA, whatever. The market is just so saturated with these games that I think people have less tolerance for games like this. You know?
Yeah. Maybe they're a little bit numb too.
Yeah. It's October, the next Call of Duty's coming out, gotta go get. It's just a cyclical routine. Yeah. To be redundant. Back then, even when people were trying to cash grab though, and just they were making bad games, because the arena, I guess, or the forum was so new, even these bad games were trying something that they weren't shameless necessarily.
They didn't have to be a commercial success. Yeah. But they introduced maybe mechanics or gameplay ideas that got implemented better down the line somewhere else.
Yeah, I remember there was an old, really bad Batman game. It was just a side scroller beat 'em up, and it didn't handle very well. The controls were so clunky, but it did have a really cool combat system. Regardless, like it had this cool it almost combined like a Mortal Kombat-esque game with a side scroll, Double Dragon, like that kind of game with like a Tekken with like control scheme. So like it was just like trying to hop on a Batman bandwagon and just trying to make money, but also at the same time like at least tried something different.
Right. I remember, so like when I buy a video game nowadays, and I'm sure you're the same way, I gotta see gameplay. I gotta see the reviews. I have to see what inner mechanics it has, and if I think I'm going to enjoy them, what the type of game is, what the genre is. There's so many different factors that go into me saying to myself, am I gonna spend this $30, $40, $60, whatever it might be? I think what has been lost is going to a GameStop, looking at the different box arts and going, oh, I recognize those characters, or my friend said this was a cool game, right? Like loosely said, oh, I enjoy this, and just picking up that game and playing it. And those were some really good experiences.
Yeah, and I definitely think the internet has kind of gone a long way into hampering a lot of excitement about games. I know for games that I just by hearing the title get excited about, so the most recent example being Resident Evil 8, I didn't watch anything. I didn't know much about the game, and I wanted to keep it that way because I wanted it to be fresh. I didn't want, you see how many IGN videos, 15 things you need to know before you buy Resident Evil 8. And I think the internet's gone a long way in kind of ruining that a little bit. And that wasn't so much the case back when we were kids growing up, where you had to wait for the next issue of Nintendo Power if you wanted cheat codes, or you had to go buy the game guide.
Or what was it, cheatplanet.com? I remember, and they weren't, at times they weren't even real cheats. They were just like, oh, if you walk down this hallway, you'll find a hidden item, right? Yeah. It just tell you where, which is so much more ubiquitous now. It's like, hey, go find these 20 feathers over the map, and you can get 800 different hits on somebody who's already done it, and shows you a step-by-step location. So you kind of lose also that sort of sense of wonder of what secrets the game holds, because somebody's already found them and posted what those secrets are.
I definitely agree, and I think that's why the game series that to me has really captured kind of my childlike wonder in world building and what's going on is actually the Dark Souls series, because even now I can go pull up a Dark Souls run and see someone open a wall that I just had no idea that ever opened. I missed this the entire time. Are you kidding me? And it's holding some, not overpowered armor, but just something to make the game just that much easier. Sitting there going, oh my god.
Something I've always wondered. My first Pokemon was Pokemon Gold when I was 5. But I'm wondering, because the games came out first, right? It was the games that came out, and then it was the TV show and so many other different mediums. But, you pick up Pokemon Blue version. You're playing it, you're like, what's this about? And you catch a level 10 Magikarp. okay, why do I have this thing that only knows Splash? And there's some kid out there who decided, you know what, I'm gonna level up. At level 20, it evolved into Gyarados. What must that feeling have been? To not know that Magikarp evolved into Gyarados and then just get this super sick serpent dragon creature.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is that level of discovery that feels kind of lost nowadays, right?
Yeah.
A new game comes out and there's already game reviewers
Get it
have
like
already
a week
looked at
early.
the game. Yeah, and then certain streamers or content producers, and they get early access to the game. And so there's already people that have access to the game, and that might have been the case back in the day as well. That sounded wow. All right.
Back in the day,
Old
we're
man,
2016.
old man shakes fist at sky. Yeah, the information didn't get out and travel as quickly. I mean, Jesus, if you, God forbid, you follow someone on Twitter who you know is gonna have access to this game, and then they post something about it.
Yeah,
You sit there and go, well, all right, cool. You know, how hard is it already to like avoid spoilers in general?
Agreed. I'm wondering if that leads to like the problem of like low attention span, right? Like if a game doesn't get you, like if a game doesn't hook you in within like the first 2 hours of playing, you're probably not playing it ever again, right? Like you gotta play like 60 hours of Monster Hunter World to like really feel like you're engaging with the game. And it's like 60 hours bare minimum, right? If you really want to learn the mechanics, learn all the weapons, it's a whole lot more time you're investing.
Capcom, if you're listening, make skippable cutscenes. Oh my god, it's the biggest buff to your game you'll ever make. I promise. It could be because when you bought a game, regardless of how bad it was, you were stuck with it.
You were stuck with it.
As soon as you opened the box, you were stuck with that game. I remember, God, I had this like really bad BMX game. It was terrible. It was a motocross game, and it was not good. But there's no returning it. I was just stuck with it. You know, I mean, I guess I could have gotten it from
GameStop.
Yeah, I could have gotten a warm 6-pack. Now I could have gone to Blockbuster and rented it, but even then, you're still stuck with it for a week.
You might as well play it. But yeah, I think like attention spans are shorter, and it's so much easier to switch games out. Like, I don't know, man. I don't want to caress my N64 every time I gotta turn it on. So I'm like, fuck it. This game's on. I'm playing it.
And once the game's loaded, you can't just alt
There's no turning
forward.
back. I think there was also a much bigger multiplayer focus in older games. There's still a co-op aspect into gaming, but it's all online co-op. It's not couch co-op. It's not sitting on a Saturday afternoon with your friends and just playing Super Smash because that's what we're gonna do for the next 4 hours. It's not like we were climbing a ranked ladder to get to platinum. We were just fucking dicking around for 7 hours playing custom games on Halo 3.
But yeah, nowadays, if you're gonna go somewhere, there has to be a reason to do it. Because otherwise, what's the point of me coming over and playing Mario Kart if I can just play Mario Kart from here?
Right. And then like even on top of that, it's like, what's my objective of spending 2 hours to play Mario Kart, right? And I don't know if then this might actually be a consequence of aging. I was hanging out with my nieces, right, who are like 9 and 12 respectively, and they introduced me to a game they like to play called Statue. It's essentially red light, green light.
Oh, okay.
Right. If you can't move when somebody's looking at you, but if they're not looking, you can move. That was it. And when I say that is it, I mean that was it. Oh, like, is there a destination we got to go to? They're like, no. And I was like, how do we win? Just don't move. But in my brain, I was like, there needs to be an objective. I think there is an aspect of aging that's universal, not just to video games, but to just having fun in general, right? You're not just there to dick around anymore. There's got to be something my 1 hour that I'm spending here has to have an objective.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's also, coming full circle back to the argument of the game's got to capture you in the 2 hours, because it's very rare nowadays that I get off work on a Friday and just have actually nothing to do that weekend, and just I'm just gonna play Smash all weekend.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
You're just like not an active part of society at that point.
Yeah, and so I guess is that part of?
I think that's part of why games when we were younger felt a little more quote unquote magical. Why the emotional economy was higher.
Oh, there you go.
As a kid, you don't need an objective, right? You're like, I'm gonna play because it's fun to bounce around a map for 4 hours.
Yeah, and did you ever just like do something in a game that for just the sake of doing it.
Yes.
You know, I remember
super jumping in Halo.
Yeah, or if you could break Call of Duty Modern Warfare, like Call of Duty 4, where you could get a rocket launcher to shoot infinitely, you could go, and if you figured out how to break the game, you could just shoot the rocket into the hole and it would actually propel you backwards, so you could literally fly around the map. And I spent like an hour doing that. For what reason? No idea.
Yeah,
it was fun.
I did that with Halo 2. Halo 2 in certain maps, if you crouched in the right spot, jumped on like a very specific spot, you would bounce yourself super high and you go way above the map, and then you could try to land wherever you could on top of buildings that you weren't normally supposed to get to. And I just literally playing by myself like 2 hours just trying to figure that out.
Maybe this just boils down to games don't break the way they used to.
Right. Maybe if they were less structurally sound. But I wouldn't spend that time doing it again, that's for sure. Not anymore.
Yeah, I wouldn't either, because it just feels bad. And you know, now a game having a ranking system is really important, because even if I'm playing a game, you know, even if the rank means nothing, it feels good to get there. But I mean, growing up, I didn't care. I mean, I dumped out. I mean, how many thousands of hours we dumped into, you know, insert X shooter here, without our ranking system ever.
Agreed.
You know, Modern Warfare 2 didn't have one. Gears didn't have one.
Halo.
You just played game battles. Yeah, Halo 4 did too. I got pretty high up in the Halo 4 one.
Also, like, ranked Halo 3 was less about what's meta and more about just being good at the game. Oftentimes, what competitive play comes down to is the character I'm playing, is the build I'm using, is it the best optimal, and less about, I mean, there's still obviously player skill that's involved, but it's not solely player skill, right? Because you could be a killer Magic player, but if you're using like a shit tier
white weenie deck,
right, like you're not going to go anywhere. Now, Magic might be a bad example because it's been around since '93, but that's the concept is.
Yeah, and I think games just really struggle to, I don't know, do they struggle to adapt, or do they adapt too well in terms of marketing for, you know, a certain age base?
I think
because games, it felt like in the 90s, were not designed for 20x-year-olds. They were designed for teenagers and
kids.
You know, and kids.
And I think, and that's what I was thinking too, as we've been getting older, video games are becoming more marketed to adults.
Yes, yeah, I guess. Is Fortnite marketed towards adults?
Fortnite's
marketed. They have Star Wars and they have to everybody. They've done a good job of.
Yeah, but like think of like bigger concepts, more adult storylines that you see, more M-rated games. Yeah, you had shooters, you know, back in the early 2000s and stuff. Now it's Call of Duty, Black Ops, Cold War has to have like these super mature themes. I still think Modern Warfare 2's storyline was more caricature than it was realistic, in terms of the way the storyline's presented is a little over the top. It's so grandiose and kids are just like, yeah, let's do it. They're less realistic in that sense. And I think certain franchises are evolving with their player bases. That,
you know, there were a bunch of Call of Duties that were made before Modern Warfare 2, but Modern Warfare 2 was just hands down the most fun to me. Modern Warfare 2, I mean, we would, you know, I had friends who would go and play Black Ops 2, and I'd still be playing Modern Warfare 2 because I just had way more fun with that than Black Ops 2, even though Black Ops 2 was good. Why, if it's, you know, they're evolving, and why is there still one title that is still so much better, even though it had been done so exhaustively before? I mean, before Modern Warfare 2, there were 5 Call of Duties.
That's true.
5.
I see what you're saying. And at that point, they weren't the only ones doing that, right? Because at that point, you also had Medal of Honor.
Yeah, and there was more competition because they had Medal of Honor. Battlefield was like bigger because Battle Company 2 was a stalwart game. I mean, there were more than, like, Call of Duty also had like Big Red 1 and a couple other spin-off games. I always fall back on it was just the time period where that was peak get home from high school and just hop on Xbox and just play with your friends. And that's just, there's less and less of that now.
I agree.
There's less ability to do that.
And I think even as adults, or adult adjacent, if you will, we don't have that feeling of, I gotta go home and I want to like just play video. Like, I don't have that feeling. I want to come home and I want to play video games after work or on my days off, but it's not to the same degree. There's no just like, oh, I'm gonna go play Nazi zombies by myself because that sounds like a good time.
So I wonder, and if there are any 16, 17-year-old kids listening to this for whatever reason, let us know. Honestly, like, Pessy, what's your favorite Call of Duty? Because maybe for them it is Black Ops 3, Advanced Warfare. Because that would be around the same time
right
that Modern Warfare 2 was for us. Is it a time period thing, or was that just actually they just somehow hit the nail on the head and that was just the best one? Because that was like Gears was the same way. Gears kind of got better. Each iteration of the game got better, but there were less and less people for me to play with, and so I wasn't as interested in playing with them and playing the game.
When I mentioned Nazi zombies, something I thought about. Do you remember the very first Nazi zombie map?
Yeah, of course.
And you remember how you unlocked it, right? You had to beat the storyline.
To beat the storyline,
and
yeah.
And then you just got it. The big secret in the very first Nazi zombie map, for anybody who's listening that's never played this, getting the ray gun out of the secret box. You could buy it on a wall, you could only get it through the random box, and you got this ray gun. You're like, oh, I'm a god. Cool, let's do this.
It took me a long time to even find the secret box. Like, I didn't realize it existed.
Me neither. Until somebody was like, oh, like, have you tried the random box? I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, what is the random box?
The random box.
And they're like, oh, like, you just like pay X amount of points and you might get a good gun. But think about hidden mechanics that you have in a Nazi zombie map now, right? Oh, I've got to go kill 20 zombies exactly, and then I've got to go to this circle and I've got to use this specific gun to shoot the sun, and then like a meteorite will fall down to the ground, and then I got to do X, Y, and Z, and then I've got this bow and arrow.
I will say it is fun. It is doing fun. The Easter eggs. They are fun,
and I enjoyed them a lot. But why couldn't I enjoy that simple? Why does it have to be that Easter egg to enjoy it? Is the better question.
Yeah, because and I will agree, because the most fun I ever had in zombies was World at War Derice. Yes. Where you would sit on the catwalk, and it was or 5.
Yeah.
But it was literally the most basic thing, where it was just like sit in an elevator, ride the elevator up and down and just shoot, and there wasn't anything to it. I think, and part of it too is I think this circles back to when there was limited technology, the focus was on different things.
Okay.
Now, specifically about Nazi zombies, now there is so much focus on the Easter egg. The Easter eggs gotta be cool. But to me, that pulls away from the rest of the game. Yeah. It's not fun for, because now if there's I can get 4 friends to play zombies. I can do that. But now if we're not going for the Easter egg, there's no fun.
Then why are we playing?
The focus of it is the Easter egg.
Yep.
When that used to not be the case.
Agreed.
The case used to be just survive.
Just survive. And and then brag to your friends when you got to like wave 22 somehow.
And I think the last zombie map that really did that one, I don't know if you played Call of the Dead. That's the one where they had like Danny Trejo, and it was all the horror kind of stars. You got the kite zombies, and there was an Easter egg, but it didn't feel like that was the main, it didn't feel like there was that ultimate objective. It was just playing. There was more to it than just the Easter egg. And so I guess maybe that's just the focus, and game developers shift focus. It's just not what we're here for. It's not the mindless fun.
Well, maybe what happened is that video games eventually gave us this focus. They gave us this objective to shoot for. And now that we have it, we don't want to go back to a time where we don't.
I do. Like part of the reason I play games is I like mindless games. You think so much during the day, and I don't want to go into a zombies game or any game really. We play Hunt Showdown a bunch, and the reason I like Hunt is just because I just hold W and left click on heads. But they shift to more Easter egg focused things, or there are just infinitely more objectives, and that's not what caters to me. And so maybe that's why games really struggle to capture my attention, because what I look for in games now is just different than what I looked for in games back when I was 15 or 16 or whatever. It would be interesting to revisit this topic, if somehow, we have this channel like 10 years from now, we have kids.
And then use our kids as an experiment. Nice, I like it.
Yeah, that's all I'm here for. Yeah. That and embarrass them to death. But it'd be interesting to see see what they're interested in, and how the focus of games shifts again, because I think we talk about nostalgia as these exciting moments in games, or these pinnacles of games, but I think what we were looking for in games back in the late 90s 2000s is just so vastly different than now, that I don't think it is possible really for a game to recapture that. It's gonna have to look different. What made games great as a kid was just there was a simplicity to them which kind of drove the development focus other places than the mechanics or the way the game looked. Like there was a baseline level you had to reach like this, and that was it, and then everything else needed to be good. Now there's so much more focus on making the game look good, and then marketing the game costs a massive part of the budget, and then potential microtransactions or whatever. And maybe just the time period, there was a time where we got on and there were people on, and that's just not the case anymore.
The real question is, have video games changed, or have we just become more bitter?
I can't.
Right.
No, that's false, because I've always been bitter.
I've always been cynical.
Yeah, I would love to hear what people's thoughts are on kind of what made games great for them growing up. And if you still do enjoy games, obviously we do, but if you still, like, what do you look for in games? What really draws you to games, and is that different now versus back, when you were a kid?
Or
and if you are a kid, please let us know, what your favorite games are currently, especially, titles that have spanned 20 some odd years. So let us know in those comments down below. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Feel free to like, subscribe. Yeah, I don't really have an outro or anything. So
this is the outro. Bow, 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 bow. Finger guns. If I'm not mistaken, actually, most people hit their prime in high school. Right?
I hit mine in 7th grade.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was an early bloomer.
So it's been downhill from then.
It's all been downhill from there.